Right. Okay. Here we go. Let's just find the thing. Right. We're up to the Mishnah. Now we are genuinely up to the Mishnah. Yeah. Last week was a bit of a dray. We did start the Mishnah. But now we're genuinely. So this Mishnah, there's a huge amount in this Mishnah, and in fact, we'll just see a second with the Gemora. Yeah, so the Gemora, so the Mishnah is at the bottom in Beis Aleph. And Beis Aleph, if I'm not mistaken, I think this is the last Mishnah of the Perek. So there's only 15. No, it's not quite the last one. The next mission is on Nun Vav Amud Aleph. The Perek goes up to the summer thereabouts. So there's a huge amount on this Mishnah, and the Mishnah says, So this Mishnah deals with people who are unable to form a chazaka against other people. Yeah? And the reason why they are unable to form a chazaka against other people, as we'll see, is because the nature of the relationship means that there is a reason why they are in the property. They are living in the property. They are using or working the property because of a particular relationship they have with the other person. So that's why they can't form a chazaka against them. You kind of turn and say, hey, you're claiming, I claim this is mine. And the other guy said, what do you mean? You work for me? Or a similar type of relationship, right? So that's what we're going to see. Let's just see the whole mission, then we'll do the Rashba. Oh, sorry, I should translate each of them. The Omnin is someone who work, or craftsmen. Shudfin is partners. Arisin is sharecroppers, people who take and work the land for a share of the profit or the share of the products, whatever. And apotropin are people who have like a ward of court to look after the affairs of what's it called, of Yisrael and Almonis. It's interesting. We were in town on Sunday morning with the Bar Mitzvah boys and their dads. No one here. And they went, one of the sites we go to, Mitzvah, go to that site of the astronomers pub, and everyone finds that very funny because like, oh, we're going to a pub, are we? And it's like mid-morning, time for a drink. No, we go to the astronomers pub on Middlesex Street, which was Petticoat Lane. But then the Victorians changed the name because they didn't like the Defender of the Sensibilities, changed to Middlesex Street. And that's true. And then Middlesex Street is an astronomers, and the astronomers pub is the site of the former Board of Guardians for the Jewish Poor. The Board of Guardians for the Jewish Poor used to be based there, and that was like the precursor to Jewish care. So it's interesting because they call themselves the Board of Guardians for the Jewish Poor. Like guardians, it's like an apotropos, really. They were responsible for the poor. Sorry? When you took us on that. Same, we would have done that as well. We went longer. I've cut it shorter for the kids, a bit shorter. We had a long time. Oh, you came as well, David. That's right. Same thing. Do you remember it? There you are. That's right. That's right. Just before we go there from there to Frying Pan Alley and Brick Lane and yeah, the best named street in the whole of London, Frying Pan Alley. Yeah.
Four was the name for people who didn't have much money.
Yeah.
Four was quite a normal turn of phrase.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But it was interesting. They called the Board of Guardians, the Board of Guardians, the Jewish poor, because that's what they were like. There was the same idea. They were like the guardian and protectors of them who looked after them.
Someone's been in the house.
Yeah, so all these people, Ein Lahem Chazaka, they can't form Chazaka. Yeah, they can't form a Chazaka. We'll see. Rashbam explains each case in detail. A man is not able to form a Chazaka in his wife's property, and neither is a woman able to form a Chazaka in her husband's property. And of course, you have to understand, how is it possible that the wife has property? Normally, that wouldn't be the case. Normally, mashakana ishakana baila. Normally, that which a woman acquires, it goes to her husband legally as becomes owned by her husband. So we have to obviously be talking here about a type of scenario where she has her own property, right? Has her own property, and therefore, and also therefore, the other way around is more understandable. The woman can't have chazaka in her husband's property. Again, we'll go into all these in detail. A father cannot form a chazaka in the property of his son, and neither can the son form a chazaka in the property of the father, right? Effectively, they each have a degree of responsibility over each other's property. It could be a son looking after, or could be that would often be the type of relationship, would be, looking after the affairs of the father's property, or vice versa. The father's looking after the affairs of the son's property, right? So therefore, that relationship itself precludes the ability to claim ownership through the mechanism of chazaka. Chazaka is a chiddush. We've learned that many times, a chiddush. How on earth can you claim? Normally, you say, I'm one of the only documents. You don't have any documents, and everyone knows it was mine. I mean, here it's not really a Moshe Chaver in a way, because you've got, okay, that's a bit of a red herring in a way, because you're in the land now, right? But normally you should know, you've got no proof that it's yours, and I have proof that it's mine. So I'm stronger than you, because everyone knows I used to own it, right? Chazak is a chiddush. Chazal protected the buyer, because he mustn't keep documents after 3 years. But that protection does not exist where there is a logical reason or a conclusion to conclude that the guy is lying, right? That the guy is lying because of the nature of the relationship with the person who's claiming that it's his.
Are we saying this is after this sort of work activity is over and he says he's buying it, we bought it? Because whilst I have a minute to suggest that the wife should have a chazaka, or the son, or
he's in the land. Yeah. He's in the land, and he's claiming that he bought it, for example.
You have to do that. If he just says he's in the land and he claims a chazaka.
No, he needs a story. He needs a story, of course. You need a story. You always need a story.
He's still there.
Yeah, you always need a story. Chazaka is 3 years working the land. You're squatting in the land for 3 years and using the land. You always need a chazaka. You always need a story. That's what we call a taina. You have to have a claim. Well, that doesn't change, right? But here it's not going to help you. Says the Mishna, all of these chazakas, that goes back on, like basically since the beginning of the parak. All of this story of chazaka of 3 years, when does this apply? B'machzik. This applies to a person who is trying to form a chazaka, and someone argues and says, no, it's mine, and he's been there squatting in the land for 3 years, and he says, I've got a taina, and he explains the taina, I bought it from you, everything we've been discussing. Aval, but no sein matana, someone who gives a gift, someone who gifts something to someone, for achin shecholku, or brothers who divide up property between them, or someone who forms a chazaka in a property of a ger. This is a ger who has no inheritors, so a ger who dies without anyone to be yorishim. A ger is kakoton shenolad. He's like he's newborn, and therefore he has no one. And if he has no one to inherit him, then people can take hold of the property and claim it as their own. It's basically hefka after he dies. In these 3 cases, if a person closes the door, or he breaks he makes a door or whatever, or he builds a wall, or he does a little breach in the wall or something like that, kolshu, a small amount, whatever it is, and we'll explain what that means. This is a chazaka. What does that mean? That's not chazaka of 3 years. That is chazaka of use, of acquisition, correct, of kinyan. Yeah. You can acquire land in 3 ways: kesef, shtar, and chazaka. That's this chazaka, right? You can acquire land through buy money, or you can write a document, or you can be machzik. And it's very confusing because it's the same word, but it's a completely different concept. Completely different concept. It is not chazaka as in proof of ownership, which is what we're trying to demonstrate as a proof. Chazaka is a raya. Chazaka of the whole of the parent is a raya, it's a proof. That's what it is. Chazaka proves that I'm the owner. There's no documentation, but the mechanism of chazaka is a proof that I own it. You understand? You say you own it, I say I own it. I'm going to prove to you that I own it. How? Because I've been here 3 years, you didn't object, and I got a good claim. Hey, it's mine. That's a proof. That's what chazaka is, a proof, right? This chazaka is not a proof. It's a kinyan. It's a demonstration that I own it. It's a way of acquisition, not demonstration. It's a way of acquiring something. Correct. So it's one way of acquiring something is if you go into someone's land, obviously when they've given it to you, right? That's the difference. That's different. There's no dispute about that, right? No simatona. You're given a gift. Someone gives you a gift of land. How are you going to acquire it? You have to a kinyan. How are you going to acquire it?
Take the land.
So it could be a star. Could be I gift it with a star. So it says in the star, the document, this is land is gifted to David or whatever. That's one way of doing it, right? You're not going to pay me money because it's a gift. So it's unlikely you're going to pay me money, right? Unless it's like a token amount or whatever, right? And the other way you're going to acquire it is through doing some work on the land. Now, this is not like metaltalin, because a movable item, let's say I want to gift you a sefer. How are you going to acquire the sefer? Pardon? Yeah, you make a kinyan on it. What we call making a kinyan, you lift it out. You can't do that with land. So the way you make a kinyan on land is by modifying the land a little bit. Okay? That's how you do it. Okay?
How do you translate to benichse?
What? What? Benichse hager. Benichse? In the property of?
Is that property? Nichse.
Nechosim. Yeah, nechosim are property. Yeah, possessions or whatever property, exactly, yeah.
What's the root word?
Neches. Neches is a property. In modern Hebrew it's the same, by the way.
Neches is property.
Yeah. Neches is I believe so. Neches is yeah, nechosim. Nechosim sheish lem achras, nechosim she'en lem achras. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Says the Rashbam. Ha'umnin. What is the umnin? Bali umnus. Okay, Bali umnus. These are people, craftsmen. Shemelichin lahem b'veisom. They take items into their houses, l'sakin kalim, to fix them up. Kagoin, saboin, dyers, okovsin, or washer people, ochayotin, I can't say washer people, ochayotin, or tailors, surke begodim, surke is like surek is like to comb. It's a part of the process of I think it's the process of dyeing or preparing garments or whatever. Shetonin lakuachu biyodi, and all these people who claim that they have bought it. So it's very interesting here. Now this is not karka; it's not land. Umnin, a craftsman. You give someone your suit, and you say, "I will please clean it for me next day service. I'm coming back tomorrow to claim my suit." And the next day you knock on his door, and he says, "It's mine. It's mine. Prove it to me, right? Prove it to me. Yeah, it's mine, right? The din is they're not allowed. They cannot form a chazaka. They cannot form a chazaka, right? Okay. Now the Rashbam adds in these words here. Now clearly these words don't belong here because well, no, they don't. Not they don't apply. No, is it the Mishna lists ein lem chazaka after the words umnim, but the way it's set up here is, and the way the Rasham has done it is he's put in the words ein lem chazaka just about umnim. He's still dealing just with the first word of the Mishnah, which is craftsman. He says we're not talking here about 3 years chazaka. There's some uman l'shayach ela b'metaltalin, because an uman, the title, the name uman, a craftsman, is a reference to metaltalin. It's only applicable to metaltalin. It's only applicable to movable items, right? The cheskas shalosh shonim l'ne'emra ela b'mekarkoi, and cheskas shalosh shonim is only referring to land. That's what it refers to, or similar. Avo b'metaltali, because like we said, houses and all, that's also land. There are other things as well. But basically, it's what it applies to. When it comes to a movable item, like a suit, someone who is muchsuk, he's got hold of something that belongs to someone else. He's got an assumption of acquisition. He holds it now. Even 1 hour, that we see that it's coming out of his hand, he's got it in his possession. Even if the other person has eidim that it was his, the person who's muchsuk now is believed to say, I bought it. Because it's the norm for someone who buys property, which is movable items, right? Like a vase or clothes or anything like that, buy it from someone else, is without eidim, without witnesses. How many times have you sold something to someone? You might not be in the trade, but if you sell something to someone, you don't get eidim normally, right? It's assumed that you don't do it with eidim. You don't write a star either. He just pays you for it. So, except for things which are normally lent out or rented out. And he says, I bought them. On those things that ain't no you're not believed. As we sold, as we say in Masech Shavuos. So that's a little bit in brackets in the Rashbam. Okay. Okay, you understand? Because the Rashbam is just saying to you, there's a bit of a rider here. You can't claim I own something if it's normally rented or lent out. Because if it's normally rented or lent out, right, or hired out, whatever, or borrow, or you lend something out, you can't come along and say, "Hey, it's mine. I bought it." Why? Because these things are normally rented out. So let's say you, let's give a simple example, right? You rent a marquee, you hire a marquee, okay, for a simcha, okay? That is dvarim hasuin, the hashir al. That is something I would assume that is normally rented or lent out. So if you turn around on the Sunday when they come to pick it up, hey, can we have it back? You say, what do you mean? I bought it. You're not believed. Why? Because it's dvarim hasuin hashir al. It's normal things that are normally rented or lent out. Therefore, you're not believed to say it's mine. But if it's something which is not usually rent or lent it out, so let's say it's a ming vase. People don't normally rent that out. Why would you rent out a vase? You're not going to rent out a vase. I suppose you could argue that maybe people do like for a simchas props or something. But let's say it's not usually rented out. And you turn around and you've got it in your house. You've got it in your house, right? And he's got it. And we see that you've got it. You see that you've got it. Even if the person, it's only been in your house for an hour, nothing, right? And the other guy has Aiden that he used to own it. And you tiny that it's yours. Right? You bring a proof. You bring a proof that, you want to get away from me, you bring a proof. However, that only applies to, let's say, if Martin has a vase in his house, right? And I claim it's mine, and you say, you sold it to me. So the halacha is, I got to prove it. And if I've got Eidim, and I can have Eidim. Yeah, they saw yesterday that vase in my house. It doesn't make a difference. It's sitting in your house, and therefore it's yours. That does not apply if Martin runs a dry cleaning shop. Because if Martin runs a dry cleaning shop, and I give Martin a suit, and then the next day Martin runs to me and says, "Hey, that suit you gave me, it's mine." No, because you're an uman, you're a craftsman. Says the Rashbam. In here with craftsmen, even things that are not usually rented out or lent out, right? But it is normally sent to a craftsman to fix it. He also doesn't have a chazaka to claim that I bought it. Since there are edim that it belonged to the other one, and he claims, I sent it to you to fix it up. So that, says the Rashbam, is the din of the first word in the Mishna. That's all we've done, the first word. Yeah. Right? That is the din of the first word. The craftsman. Normally the rule is movable items, anything that is normally just sold without edim. You don't sell things with witnesses. You don't make shtaros, anything else. It's in your house. It's yours. I want to prove it's mine. I've got to prove it's mine. Okay. If I can't prove it's mine, it's yours. Finished. Gone. Right? Tough luck. Because otherwise, why is it in your house? Like, why on earth has Martin got my stuff in his house unless I sold it to him or gave it to him? Right? It's not going to be there otherwise. That is not apply if he normally does work for me in this area, like he prepares garments or he prepares vases or he paints things or whatever. So you paint vases for a living. You understand? Because then clearly, it's obvious that the only reason he's got it is because I asked him to do a job. And therefore he can't turn around to me and say it's mine. Clear? Yeah. Right. Yeah. Okay. Now, that's the first din in the Mishnah, the first din of Umnin. Right. It's interesting that it's here in a way because we're dealing mainly with karka, but it does come in because it applies to the same din applies in the sense that this din applies to this whole list. The next one is shutfin. Shutfin is shalakul karka b'shutfus. The next Rashbam. They acquired karka in partnership. And one of them was machzik in his friend's part of the land, the other side. And he consumed the fruit the whole 3 years. It's not chazaka. Now, logically would say, why not? We both jointly own land, right? So I've got half and you've got half. If I have spent 3 years squatting in your half, l'ch'ora, that should be a good chazaka, because I can say you should have objected. 3 years I was using your part of the land, I was using your half. Yeah, 3 years you didn't say anything.
Did they define the chilek?
So that's an interesting question, and it would seem not. So Rashbam is the Gemora is going to discuss that whether there's a difference. One of the things that comes up in the Gemora is whether there's a difference between what we call land that is large enough to be mechalek or not. The Gemora is going to talk about that Yesh bodin chalaka, ein bodin chalaka. Sometimes you have, we encountered this at the beginning of the Masechta. You can have property that basically is large enough to divide up reasonably, so that we each get a reasonable section, right? It's a bit like Siamese twins. You still get a reasonable section if you divide it. What?
So you can read this by time.
By time.
You have for a week.
Oh, so that's what we're going to talk about. That's what we're going to talk about. But there is enough gemina in this whole din of shutfin as to whether it is a type of land where where there is where I can force you. You see, the way a shutfus in karka works is sometimes you can have a scenario where the land is big enough so that I can force a division, a separation. I don't like sharing with you. Let's say I don't like sharing with you anymore. So it's got to be a minimal size for me to be able to force your hand to split it. Because sometimes you can have land, right? Let's say Jeremy and me are neighbors and we share a back garden. But the back garden, that's the deal. That's the way the property, that's the way the whole setup was arranged or whatever years before either of us moved in, for example, right? So it could be that it's such a small plot of land that it's to split it is not useful, is not properly useful for either of us. And therefore Jeremy can turn around to me and say, what do you mean? He doesn't want to split it, he'd rather share it because then he can both make use of the whole area. Makes sense? That's how it is, right? So here it is not a chazaka on the other half. The shekain derech shutfin.
My hammer mineral of this shutfin in the Mishna.
Yeah,
Has to be there. Has to be a chaim.
has to be. What do you mean?
You have to have a divide.
Why?
Of the land. Because
Why?
Otherwise, what you were why you should.
Why? We could jointly use it, or it could be unclear how we use it. It could be. I mean, the arrangement could be unclear.
With you in something.
Yeah.
And by definition, that means that we can go into it together.
Not necessarily, because who knows what the arrangement was? Shutfas can be expressed in all sorts of ways.
That's why it has to be a chedek.
No, but the hava mina of the Gemora, the hava mina could be that, and that's why I sort of like expressed it like that, because a hava mina would be, okay, we're shutfin. But shutfin means that we can both use it. And therefore, if you've let me use it by myself for 3 years without saying anything, isn't that a proof that it's mine and you sold it to me, the other half? You've done nothing. You've said nothing. You've said nothing. You're here. You're around the corner. You live down the block, and there's a field we own in partnership. We jointly own it, and there are the title deeds and everything else. And you've said nothing for 3 years while I plowed the land. Isn't that proof it's mine? Right? That's the hava minute, right? The answer is no. It's no proof. Shekain derech shutfin, because this is the way shutfin operates. Lechol zeper shalosh shonim u arba shonim. That one of them eats the fruit for 3 or 4 years. And then the other guy does the same for the next 3 or 4 years. In other words, you might have all sorts of reasons why it is not in your interest at the moment to benefit from this field. Let's say you've gone off farming. You've gone off farming, you become a sailor, right? You're not really into farming. Farming is very intensive work. You haven't got the patience for it. You haven't got time in your day to hire and look after farm laborers and whatever. So you say to your shutaf, no problem. You take it. I can't deal with this now. I'm busy. In 3 or 4 years, I'm going to come back and I'll have as many years as you had. I will take in lieu of the fact that you've had that time. So a completely normal way to operate. And because it's a normal way to operate, if after 3 years the guy turns around and says, hold on a second, 3 years you didn't say anything, it must be mine. What are you talking about? Yeah, why should it be yours? You know, it's normal. I let you use it and you won't let me use it.
I find it very interesting that the Rashbam is adding to the Arbush on it.
Well, I think the simple explanation why he does that. It's a good point to pick up on that.
Because of Shemitah.
I didn't think of Shemitah, but I mean, it could be
because of the 3 and the
4
3.
and then 3.
Correct.
It can't be more than that. Very good. Could be.
I just find it very interesting that he adds.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. But I think it could also be because he's just trying to say to you that it's like almost like a kal v'chomer. In other words, this might go on for 4 years. It might go on for years and years, this arrangement. So you could be squatting in the land for 5 years, maybe. And it doesn't make a difference. You can't prove it's yours. Right. Now, interestingly, he brings a different gerus in the Mishnah, which leaves out one clause. If we say the Mishnah to Rabbeinu Gershom, in the Mishnah of Rabbeinu Gershom, it's interesting phrase. Say the Mishnah to Rabbeinu Gershom. Also, Rabbeinu Gershom had an order of the Mishnah, which the Rishonim were in possession of, and how he ordered the Mishnah, his text of the Mishnah, right? Rabbeinu Gershom didn't live that long before Tosfos and Rashi, and his parish is printed on the side of the Gemara, Rabbeinu Gershom, right? Rabbeinu Gershom Ma'ar Hagola. You have to understand, Rabbeinu Gershom, he was called the light of the exiles. You know, a lot of what we do is based on the cherem of the rules are set down by Rabbeinu Gershom, right? All sorts of things, So 2 wives, exactly, 2 wives, and Gershon come Garish Bal Korcha and things like that, which are Ma'asim B'chol Yom, not quite B'chol Yom, but could be Ma'asim B'chol Yom. So Rabbeinu Gershom's Mishnah had a slightly different text. It said those three. It only says 3 categories. It doesn't say the word craftsman. But this is actually a maskana in the Gemara. This is all the conclusion of the Gemara actually is. He says, alma yesh shutaf she'ein lo chazaka. There is a shutaf who doesn't have a chazaka. The kivon the shutaf ein lo chazaka. Since a shutaf does not have a chazaka, kol shekain uman, kol shekain uman. How much more so? An uman doesn't have a chazaka. Ein a chazaka. And kol shekain uman can be farish Gemara. How much more so an uman, a craftsman, as the Gemara explains. That's what I've got to know here. It's a bit difficult to understand what he's trying to say here. Rabbeinu Gershom did not have this in the Gemara. It did not have this in the text, his text of the Mishnah, right? Rabbeinu Gershom's text of the Mishnah did not contain the word umnin. But the conclusion of the Gemara, says the Rashbam, is clear that what? That it does have that umnin also doesn't have chazaka. 1 second. I'm from Rabbeinu Gershom. Logos and Umar Mishnah show me. Rabbeinu Gershom. Rashbam. Hey, nachta bekarka. V'zeh mitzaltzim. V'shmol tzani umen sveli d'mai ba'umen binyan. Shani. Interesting. Yeah, the Rashbam says, see, the Rashbam seems to understand that the word umnin doesn't really belong in the Gemara, it be in the Mishnah, because not the word umun. You see, the Rashbam seems to say like this: that in Rabbeinu Gershom's text of the Mishnah, it did not have the word umnin, the craftsman. Why? Because you see in the Gemara that it's obvious. The conclusion of the Gemara is, that everyone holds that a partner can't form a chazaka. If a shutuf can't form a chazaka, kol shekain an uman. If already a partner who actually owns it together with the other guy can't form a chazaka, it's not as kol shekain. If I give someone something to work on, they can't form a chazaka, right? So it's obvious that you can't form a chazaka. That seems to be how the Rashbam understands it. The Yefei Einayim, which is a pirush at the back of the Gemara, one of the Achronim, he says in modern Gemaras, it's one of those ones that they list all together in the like they have like a Yalkul Meforshim at the back. If in my one, it's an older one, so it just prints it separately. He says that the Yerushalmi has the text of the Mishnah that is in the Yerushalmi, right? Is like Rabbeinu Gershom's Girsa, but they brings the Mefarshim there who say that one of the Mefarshim there says that a different reason why it's not in the Mishnah, because it's not comparable to the other cases. Which, if you think about it, is very mistaken. Do you understand? It's not comparable. It's metaltalin and it's immediate. It's not gimel chashonim, and it doesn't really belong for that reason, right? It doesn't fit with the others in terms of the content. In terms of the content, you're going to tell me that Shmuel, we'll see in the Gemara that Shmuel, he says, is going to talk about a craftsman. But Shmuel, taught in Mishnah, is going to say uman. He wasn't talking about an uman, a craftsman of metaltalin. Shmuel was talking about an uman, let's say a work craftsman who works in a building, something like that. So there is 3 years. Okay. Anyway, that's the side. So now the next case in the Mishnah is Varisin. The Arisin. Who are the Arisin? Says the Mishnah, says the Rashbam, they go down and they fix up the land, they work the land or whatever, and the deal is that they get half of the profit or a third or a quarter of the whatever it produces. Yeah. If if he claims that I have been machzik in the land for a certain number of years, v'achalti apeiros, and I consumed. He says, I've been there 3 years, right? The required number of years. And I consume the fruit. It's not chazaka. Because the person who claims that it says the guy who argues against him can claim what? Larisa soradative. I put him in the land as an oris, as a sharecropper. And either he would pay me back the fruit, that was the deal, or he wouldn't pay me back the value of the fruit, but he would owe me the money. So kaftim olav milva, the zokif is like zokif kefufim, stand up, right, straighten the bend. The kaftim olav milva, the phrase used in Gemora, is when you basically transform something into a debt. That's the phrase used in the Gemara. What's the phrase? Zokfin of mil, whatever. Anyway, that's what it means. So kaftim means you stand it up as a debt. You create a debt out of it. So that's what he says, right? He says either he says the ma'ara, he's claiming chazaka. I've been there 3 years, it's mine. And the ma'ara, the person who says no, it's not, it's mine. He says, yes, it's true. The reason why you've been there 3 years is because you were working the land on my behalf, and you were going to pay me either the value of the fruit, or you're going to owe me the money. Nami, alternatively, minhag arisim, the custom of the sharecroppers is la'avoid karka, to work land eser shonim for 10 years. And the owners consume the fruit for 5 years of the whole field. The arisim also use the fruit, eat the fruit for 5 years. You know, that's normal behavior. It's a bit like the shutuf, a bit like the shutfin, right? The partners. It's normal behavior. So therefore, you can't claim ownership. All right? Yeah? So that's the cases. Interesting, there's no commentary of the Rashbam at all on the word apotropin, but that's well, I believe, I'm sure will be dealt with in the Gemara, but it seems to be relatively straightforward. What it means like apotropin, as you said, of your son. Okay, so now the next case is that a man cannot form chazaka, husband and wife to husband. Lola ish. What is the scenario that a man can't form a chazaka in his wife's property? A man who consumes the fruit of the nichsei melug of his wife. What does that mean? That means, right? That means the property which she brings into the marriage. There's nichsei melug and nichsei tzon barzel, right? Nichsei melug is property that basically she retains ownership of. He is allowed to use in terms of like benefit from the fruit, okay? But she essentially retains ownership. Bring you back to ksubas. As you know, Dafyomi, it's not so long ago. Feels like long ago, but it wasn't so long ago, right? And the difference between nichsei melug and nichsei tzon barzel is who bears the ultimate responsibility for the fluctuation that might occur to the property itself. If it's nichsei melug, right, then it's hers, and it's hers. And he can benefit from the fruit, but ultimately we say pirsu lo, hosiru lo. That's the phrase used in the Gemara. If it goes down in value, it's her loss, and if it goes up in value, it's her gain, right? And if the marriage ends, she takes it with her, right? Nichsei tzon barzel is the opposite, because nichsei tzon barzel, in the nichsei tzon barzel is effectively it becomes his, and therefore that means what? That means that if it goes up or down in value, he is the one who, well, he retains it. Always, I think it's easy to find. Yeah, but there's a Rashi. It's always good to. It's good to know this particular Rashi is the beginning of some Aleph in Yevamos. There's a beautiful Rashi where he spells it out very, very clearly, the difference between nichsei melug and nichsei tzon barzel. He says, "Masho esha machneses lebayla," that which a woman, he's talking about nichsei melug, avdei melug, serve, that which a woman brings into her husband, and she evaluates how much they're worth to him. In other words, she evaluates what they're worth, and then the kabbalah alov b'achras ksubasa, okay, and so that he accepts them, and as part of the achrayas of her ksuba. Kamosha Kosman, as we write, in other words, the responsibility he has for them. Kamosha Kosman, Don Dunya Dino Lay. This is the Nadunya, the Nadun, the dowry that she brings into him, who Mosif Kenegdon, and he adds on opposite them, a Kosif, Sachakol, Kibalol Ploni, Kafka Kasubosa. So all of that is Kohen Son Barzel. Sorry, he's defining here first Son Barzel, right? In other words, what a woman brings into the marriage, and he accepts as part of the ksuba, so he accepts responsibility for it. Okay, that's the dowry, effectively, all this part of that she brings in, and then he adds a certain amount onto that. This is all spelled out in the ksuba, right? And we say Sachakol, he has the total amount that he's accepted upon himself is this and this amount. That is called Son Barzel, iron sheep. V'yesh she machneses momon harbe. Some women will bring in a lot of money, but she doesn't write all of them in the ksuba. And she leaves them over for herself. She doesn't put them in the ksuba. Those are nichsei milug. What happens to those? The husband is allowed to consume the fruit that the land produces during the marriage, but the keren, the principal, is hers. If they die, then it's her loss. Or if they get down in value, then it's her loss. Or if they go up in value, it's hers as well. Lashon Son Barzel. What is the lashon of Son Barzel? Says Rashi, iron sheep. It means keren kayim. She'im poiches v'nifsad. It doesn't go. It doesn't. It's fixed. It doesn't get down. Doesn't get worse. They're like iron, like sheep. Sheep that are made of iron. They're like a car. She'ain poiches v'nifsad. It always remember like a car. Keren kayim. She'ain poiches v'nifsad. It doesn't go down in value. He's going to have to pay their full value, right? If he dies or divorces her. It's a bit like putting money in a bank where the downside is you can't make any more money from them. The upside is you will get back the value you invested. Do you know what I mean? It's like putting into a fixed rate bond or whatever. No, am I making sense?
Yeah.
Whereas the other one,
It's not a fixed rate.
no, it's like shares. It's like you're taking out whatever. You know, your value of investments can go up as well as down, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you take on the risk. Who takes the risk? That's the question, right? Is it her risk or her risk? Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That's it, right? Remember that. It's the first Rashi parak. Almona Kohen Gadol, 7th parak of Gomas. That's where he spells it out. I'm sure it's other places as well, but that's one. So therefore, here what we have is we have a man who is consuming the fruit. By the way, interestingly, Ashkenazi ksubas, it doesn't spell out any amounts. You know that. It just says it's fixed, right? The amount is fixed for everyone. 200 for Masayim for a Basula and 100 Mea for Almana, but it's all because then the Ksubas is Rabbanon for an Almana, or a Gerusha, but it's fixed. We don't say it's not variable. Yeah, it's not Ashkenazi Ksubas are not variable. They are. That's the minhag. We keep our car. People keep Ashkenazim keep their cars close to their chest. They don't spell out. It's all. In other words, the amount that's in the Ksuba is actually fixed. It's not variable. But it spells out that he is Mosif Kenegdon Mea Sacha Kol Masayim makes 200. Whatever, it's all spelt out there. But a Sfardi Ksuba, it does. It's longer, and often it does spell out a specific amount. Yeah, it spells out a specific amount, right? In a Sfardi Ksuba, normally.
What do we do in the
Well, Nachsim are looking never in the Ksuba anyway, right? Your question is more about Nechse Tzon Barzel. So we say, as from my understanding is, what was that?
And that's it. It's irrelevant.
No, but Nechse Tzon Barzel is a question, because let's say you have a Sephardi marriage where she brings in a house, for example. So they can put the value of the house in the ksuba sometimes. They'll say $500,000 shekel, $1 million shekel, 2 million shekel, whatever, and it'll be there in the ksuba. Ashkenazim will never ever say that. You never say that with Ashkenazim. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, is that the ksuba is it defines still the amount that he accepts upon himself. It doesn't mean that there isn't other property that's also common as well, but it's accepted of. He's accepted it for this fixed value or something like that. I think. Right. Yeah, I mean, there's much more to it, but anyway, that's ksubas. So what happens here? A man who consumes the fruit of nichsei maluk of his wife cannot form a chazaka b'nichsei ishtay in his wife's property. Because that's the norm. The norm is that he consumes the fruit. If he divorces her, right? If he divorces her, she's going to take the nechsimiluk back. That's what nechsimiluk is. It's not in the ksuba, and she takes it back after he divorces her. The Gemora therefore says, asks a question. This is obvious. Clearly, a man who, during the course of the marriage, is working the land, is looking after the land, right? Is eating the fruit, is eating the oranges from our orange grove. When that orange grove is hers, right, and it's going to go back to after the marriage, obviously he can't turn around and say, it's mine. Can't form a chazaka. Because the deal, that's the deal. The deal is you get to use it while you're married. And the reverse case is a woman can't form a chazaka b'nichsei baila in the property of her husband. What's the scenario? What's the case? If ochla perish shall stay baila gimel shonim, if she consumes the fruit of the field of her husband for 3 years, she cannot claim l'koachu biyodi. She can't say I bought it, even though she's been using the husband's field for 3 years. The kivon. One second, what did you tell me?
What's the miles attainment after the Peshita?
What do you mean? The Gemora says,
what's the Havamina of the Mishnah?
No, that's the Gemara's question. That's the Gemara's problem. It should be obvious. That's the Gemara's problem.
It's not.
No, the Gemara asks, it's obvious, this is obvious, this thing. No, it's obvious that a man can't form a chazaka in a husband in a wife's property.
Yeah, but it's a normal structure. It would be a Peshita, yeah, but miles attainment, we would have thought this.
And that's what the Gemara will do. But the Rashba hasn't told us that yet. Oh, I don't. It's much later on, I think. Yeah. We'll get there. There's a long way to go before we get to that.
That's why I was wondering.
Yeah, that's right. And the Simon is the same thing here. If she uses the fruit of her husband for 3 years, she eats the fruit. She can't say, I bought it. Why? The king of the Mazonis Isha al Baila, because since the husband is obligated to feed his wife, Shavikla lemeichal peri. He's going to leave her to eat the fruit, right? That's his job. He's got to feed her. So obviously, if she's eating the fruit, that's why he doesn't object, because he's got a responsibility to feed her. And again, the one else, it's obvious that she can't form a chazaka and say, actually, I own this land, because obviously she's eating it because that's the fruit he's giving her. He's giving her oranges every day. Now, so the father and the son, or the son against the father, they are like apotropin, right? They're like looking after each other's assets, or they have that sort of arrangement, and therefore they can't form a chazaka. When do all these chazakas apply? In other words, when do we say that it's not a chazaka? And there are some that are a chazaka, but you need 3 years. In other words, everything we've discussed up to this point, this only applies for machzik. The Gemara explains, a chazaka which has a taina, and there's a dispute, but the other one comes along and says, hey, yours is mine, not yours. That's what we were talking about until now. But a person who gives a gift before Neinu, in front of us, and he agrees to him. He said, go and make a chazaka. That's what I want you to do. I'm giving it to you as a gift. I'm not selling it, so there's no money changing hands. There's no document, but I'm giving it to you as a gift. The Chaim alone, and we hold the karka niknes bekesa b'shtar b'chazaka. That land can be acquired through money, through a document, or through chazaka. And that type of a chazaka, which is in place of a kinyan, that's what it is. It's a chazaka of kinyan. Liknos karka, to acquire land. In those cases, kivon de noal v'godar v'chulu v'chazaka liknos. Once he's done one of these activities on the land, he's closed it up, whatever. That's a chazaka to acquire it. Pardon?
Can you do Latia?
I think the Gemora describes and goes into all the different things, some of the different examples of things you can do. One of the things I think that is discussed is Rofak Beipurti. You dig a little bit of the land, So how small a thing can you do? What?
Plow it.
Yeah, plow it a little bit, but how small? Stick a spade in it,
I'm wondering, how significant does it have to be?
Yeah, I think the Gemora discussed all that. I think the Gemora discusses that, yeah. Shecholku. So this is the examples given where this type of chazaka would apply would be someone giving a gift, Or v'achin shecholku, that means v'rotze kol echad is kos b'shaloi. Each one wants to be zoich in his own property. So they can't be choser. They can't change their minds. That's the rationale. You'd say like, okay, let's say two brothers split up property between them. So why are they forming a chazaka? Like, why do they need to do a chazaka? Why do they need to be kaina? They divide it up between them. That's what Rashbam is kind of answering, yeah? You understand? They divide up the properties. One got one house, and one got the other house. One got the house in Spain, and one got the house in London. So what's the big deal? Why do you need to go and board up a window there? You know? The answer is because they want to make sure that no one can change their minds. We came to an agreement. Whatever. This was the what's it called? This was the division of the estate. And therefore, how do you do that? How do you cement it? The answer is by forming a chazaka. Or third one is b'nichsei ager she'ein lo yarshin. This is a convert who has no inheritors, and anyone who comes first and forms a chazaka in his property gets it. Because where else does the property of the ger go? If a ger dies without yarshim, who's going to inherit him? No one. And therefore, the halacha is that anyone can be konet. It's hefka. No, al osa deles. No, there are all rules about that as well. I mean, the ger could give us gift before, but it's about a situation where someone dies, but ain't lo yarshim. What do you mean ain't lo yarshim? Everyone has yarshim. The answer is the ger. Yeah, yeah. There's all sorts of dinner that apply to the ger. No, al osa deles. If he forms a door, the godar chayma, or he build a wall. That's another way of doing it. Paratz pirza, you break an entrance. Kadeshi konis, you can get into it. Kolshu, Gemora Farash, more explain what does it mean kolshu a little bit. Harezu chazaka. In all these cases, this is a chazaka. In what sense? Levilti chazor zeh. So that neither of them can retract one from the other, given the bereshus chaver hechsik, since he's machzik with the permission of his friend. Because that's the case. Right? That's a very important point. Why is it that you can't be chayzer? Why is it enough just to do something to the land? Because I gave you permission. Like I said to you, I'm selling this to you. I'm giving it to you, whatever. Yeah? And therefore, do something small, and that is enough to show that it's mine. All right? Let's just make a start on the Gemora. Because the Gemara is a debate between the Avua de Shmuel and Levi. Well, Avua de Shmuel and Levi, says the Gemara. Avua and the father of Shmuel and Levi, Tonu, they together, Rashbam says that Levi was his friend. The two of them together, Tonu, they taught in the Mishna the word shutuf ein lo chazaka. That a shutuf can't form a chazaka, a partnership. The kol shekain uman. And how much more so an uman, a craftsman? That means they didn't have the word uman, a craftsman, in the Mishnah. Right? The Mishnah just said shutuf ein lo chazaka. And then they said, this goes back to what we said Rabbeinu Gershom's gives, right? Kol shekain uman. Like they said, and obviously an uman, right? Let's see the Rashbam just on that to understand that. The father of Shmuel and Levi, his friend, Tonu b'Mishnah Nisan, they taught in the Mishnah, Shutuf hashutfin or apotropin chulu. They said the shutfin and apotropin don't have chazaka. Awal uman lo tonu, but they didn't teach the word uman. The kol shekein dein lo chazaka, because how much more so? It's a kal v'chomer. There's no chazaka. Do ein lo chilek klal. He has no ownership of it at all. That we should say that because since he had a chelik in it, he also acquired from his friend his part. It's obvious it was definitely given to him just to fix it up, to mend the clothes or whatever, and you can't possibly form a chazaka. What? Yeah, and therefore they didn't even need to say that in the Mishnah because it's obvious. It's obvious. Interesting what the Rashbam says, Ein lo chelek klal. Because, in other words, Rashbam is telling us here, what is the logic to say, and he really spelled this out on the Mishnah as well. What is the logic to say, what was the haba mina that a shutaf could form chazaka?
Like what Rob said before.
What? No. What is the hava mina to think that a shutaf can form a chazaka? Because since I own part of it anyway, there is part of it that I own, right? So it's not such a great step to say that I actually bought the other half from you 3 years ago. It's a reasonable thing for me to say, reasonable claim for me to make. right? That's why it's a chiddush that a shutuf can't form a chazaka, because the other guy can always respond and say, no, we had an agreement. The agreement was you use the whole land for 3 years and I use the whole land for 3 years. But you can definitely see the havamina. You can see why it's a chiddush to say that shutuf can't form a chazaka, because it's a completely reasonable thing to say that because I own half of it, I also bought the other half from you. It's not such a strange thing to happen. People, partners buy out. Don't they buy things out all the time? What do they do? And therefore, that's why but you can't do that. You can't do that, right? But when it comes to an uman, why on earth would you have a hava mina that he's allowed to claim ownership?
It's a bit of an oxymoron. Shutuf can't do a chazaka. You might have the happening that Shutuf can do a chazaka because he's a Shutuf in the land and he's held that still for 3 years, and therefore he can create a chazaka, but then he's a Shutuf. So he couldn't create the chazaka in the first place.
No, the point is there are two ways of looking at a shutfus arrangement. One way of looking at the arrangement is positive in terms of his ability to form a chazaka, and one is negative. In other words, on the one hand, the fact that he's a shutuf means he has ownership. If he has ownership, that is a step in the right direction towards owning the whole thing, meaning it's a logical thing to say, because I owned half, I then bought out the other half, right? On the other hand, that very same factor is the reason why it's logical to say you don't own it. And that's what the Gemora, that's what the Chiddush of the Mishnah is. In other words, because you're a shutuf, that's why your claim of ownership is not right.
And then even on half of it. So even if he bought a field,
Correct. Correct.
even though he said this was my half and that's his half, and we've always agreed that, you can still never claim chazaka
On the other half.
That's more than-
And that's because it's normal practice of shutfus. No, on your half, but you know your half. Okay, that depends how what the arrangement is. We're not talking about your half. We're talking about the other half, right? The whole field. And there- No, but the point, no, because the point we're saying is what a shutuf cannot do. It's an interesting question. Can he claim ownership of half? Can he say this half was always mine or not? I think the more talks about this, switch it over or not, whatever. But you can't say the whole field is yours, because the other guy can always say, no, this was the arrangement we had. 3 years for me, 3 years for you. Right? On the whole field. So that is avoid the Shmuel and Levi. Shmuel Tani, but Shmuel we've taught in the Mishnah as follows: Uman ein lo chazaka, a craftsman cannot form chazaka. Avol shutuf yesh lo chazaka. Wow! So Shmuel says that a shutuf can form a chazaka. Says the Rashbam, "Dim isat lo machlo chelkai." Because if he hadn't sold him his part, he should have worked the land. He should have been there present, working the land, eating the fruit. So therefore you see that shutuf is not so simple. Vaz the Shmuel at Talmes is the Gemara, and Shmuel goes according to his reasoning. Dama Shmuel, because Shmuel said, Hashutfin machzikin zelzeh. Shutfin are able to do 3 things, Shmuel said. Number 1, they could form a chazaka against each other. That's Shmuel's view. Number 2, umeidin zelzeh. They can testify against each other in Beis Din. And number 3, v'nasim shomrei socha zelozeh. They can be shomrei socha, paid guardians one for another. Rashbam explained each of these. Machzikin zeh al zeh. If someone forms a chazaka in his own chelek and his friend's chelek for 3 years, he uses all of the land for 3 years. Have a chazaka. That's not like our Mishnah. Yeah, he's using the land normally. He's obviously using the land normally. Again, it's not like our Mishnah. Shmuel had a different version of our Mishnah. He said that he had in the Mishnah Uman.
No.
And not shutuf. On the contrary, Uman, he said that's a din in the Mishnah. An Uman can't form a chazaka, but a shutuf can. Number 2, umeidin. 1 second. Umeidin zal's chelko shal zel amidu biyodai. They can testify, one of them, about the other guy's chelek to establish it in his hand. In if someone from the marketplace comes, someone from outside comes to query his ownership. Before to come on. Okay, so the Gemara does a whole sugya on this. The Gemara doesn't explain why, very fascinatingly, the shutuf shouldn't be noger be'edus. How can one partner in a business endeavor, we jointly own the land, I'm going to testify, you understand? So maybe together with another aid, so 2 aidim. If someone else is coming along and being mafakbik and sort of saying, well, yeah, you don't really own it, the other shutuf, right? So I can come along and base it, I can testify with the owner. I'm bit noger with Davana because I like you. I want to be a partner with Avi. I don't want to partner with anyone else. Do you understand? But this is the question that we'll deal with. Number three, even asking kashem misachas they can be like, or Shmuel has the word like, can be like Shomer Sachar. That means if from the house of one of them, the item which is owned jointly is stolen, he's obligated to pay like a paid guardian, a Shomer Sachar. Now that's interesting. That means to say they become Shomer Sachar. We had no formal arrangement. Normally, a Shomer Sachar, there's a formal arrangement. So I want Jeremy to look after something. Jeremy says, no problem, but it's gonna be difficult for me to look after it because I've got to look after and everything else. So pay me something. So fine, let's say I agree to pay Jeremy £50 a week to look after my poodle, right? For example, right? So he becomes a Shomer Sachar over my poodle. In that case, he's a Shomer Sachar. Here, Nasim Shomer Sachar. They become like Shomer Sachar without even though there's no formal arrangement. And if it's stolen from the house of one of them, he has to pay like a Shomer Sachar. What's the din of a Shomer Sachar? Shomer Sachar is Chaim for Geneva and Aveda, right? He's Chaim for Geneva and Aveda if it's stolen. He's got to pay. V'zeu scharai. And this is his schar. What is the payment? How can he be a Shomer Sachar? I'm not paying you anything. The answer is Shegam Chaveira Yishmar Kol Kashir Zman Shemasham Mazachshav. The payment is that I'm going to pay you. The other guy is going to guard for him the same amount of time that you are guarding now. It sounds like an understood arrangement that is built into a partnership arrangement that we automatically become Shomer Sachar, right, on each other's parts. So let's say we jointly own an item. So we each chayav, and it's stolen whilst one of us is looking after it, for example, because it's not always in the land, and we're not both in the land at the same time. Land is not such a good example because land is not going to be stolen in the same way, right? But let's say it's a movable item, like I give the example before, and there's a dog or something like that. We jointly own it, even though there's no statement and signed agreement, right? That you're a Shomer Sachar whilst the dog is in your house. The nature of a shutfus agreement, says Shmuel, the nature of a partnership is a Shomer Sachar type of agreement. Because when I'm looking after the dog next week, yeah, that's how I pay you. You look after it week one, okay? And how am I paying you for looking after it? By looking after it the next week myself. That's a payment, isn't it? And therefore we're Shomer Sachar by definition. When the payment is each time we flip it backwards and forwards. That itself is the schar. And therefore the nafkamina is if it's stolen while it's under your domain, I can say a chayav. Geneva.
Do we assume that should implies actor should make it?
Yeah.
It can't be a silent.
No. You're silent. What do you mean silent? It's agreement. It doesn't make a difference. We're shutfus. We're shutfin.
That partnership means you're actively involved.
It doesn't make a difference. We're shutfin. By definition, we've got an agreement to be shutfin. That's what's going on.
You can be quiet. You've not done 3 years.
Who cares about quietness? I'm a shutuf or not? We jointly own the thing. Yes. So we have that's it. We jointly own it.
Our restaurant suggested that the activity.
Nothing to do with it. A shutfus is we jointly own something. That has practical ramifications in halacha, one of which is that it becomes a Shomer Sachar. Yeah. No. I mean, the Gemora is going to talk about these specifics of Shmuel later on, but anyway, it's a shame we will continue next week. Yeah. Okay.
Explain again.